Hi everyone, Narelle here, and in this video I wanted to show you how you can save a ruined background. Now I'm fairly new to alcohol inks and creating backgrounds and things like that, and I know there's lots and lots of techniques out there I can do with these, but I haven't got there yet. So I've just basically been dropping the alcohol ink on the Yupo paper and seeing what happens and mixing colours and things like that. So they're pretty basic backgrounds I've been creating. And in my last video where I was just having a play with alcohol inks, I created these two backgrounds but didn't show them again at the end of the video because they were quite wet and not dry. And I like the one on the left, the deep reds and the oranges, but the one on the right, it's disgusting, the greens and the browns. I really don't like it. And I have played with this so many times. And the good thing about alcohol inks is you can keep going over them and over them and over them and trying to make something better of them. But that right one, I thought, it's ruined. I can't make anything from it. So then I thought, well, the one on the left's pretty boring as well. And I wanted to make some highlights on it with some metal or type of glitz or something. So I've got these little pots of all-purpose ink by, the label, who are they? I think they're Tesenko, I don't know how you even pronounce that. So, hang on. Yeah, anyway, you know the company I mean. And I've got one that's called Vegas Gold, and the other one is called Bright Copper. And I've seen the metallic type look when people do alcohol inks in the past, but I don't have any metallic alcohol ink. So I thought, well, I'm going to try and create a fake effect and paint on these paints, these metallic paints, and see what I can come up with. So on the one on the left, I'm adding gold, and the one on the right, I'm going to add copper. Yeah, and I really underestimated how fine you need to be with these, and some of it is quite thick and basically what I think is ugly. But I was determined to make something of these backgrounds and not waste them. So I just had a play and I just kept adding the metallic ink, and wherever sort of was the edge of a bubble, I guess you call it, is where I sort of tried to paint the gold, knowing that the final product of these panels will be a card and I'll have to cut it down anyway. So like these are 5x7 panels and the card fronts are 4 by 5 3/4 or something. So I know a fair bit of this will be cut down, and I can always add on top of these panels as well and disguise it a little bit more. And even if it's really, really bad, just put a layer of vellum on top so you don't actually see a lot of the detail underneath, but you do still get the colour and the effect. But I didn't want to have to put the vellum on top. So I was experimenting really with these, seeing how it would work. The one on the left, the red one, came out much nicer than the brown and green one. I swear this bit of cardstock is doomed because the ink came out disgusting on it, the alcohol ink, and I'm getting really heavy-handed with this copper paint, and I'm really not liking it. So it nearly ended up in the bin, but I persevered, and yeah, and you'll see later, I actually did make a card from it. So I've used again the Vegas Gold, I think it's called Vegas Gold on the left, and the one on the right is the Bright Copper. And I've had these paints for years and years and years. So now that that's done, I'm going to put them aside dry and then create some other elements to go on them and create cards. So here they are, all dried and finished, and I actually quite like the one on the left. Now the gold's a bit heavy in places, but I still think it works. This one, oh, this is a whole nother story. Yep. And again, I nearly threw it out, but went, no, I'm going to persevere. So I cut out some elements to put on the front to make them cards. And I've just got this swirly die. I don't know what brand it is. I've had it in my stash for years. And then this leaf die. So the one on the left I cut out of gold foil paper, just the one large swirl for the card front. And then the one on the right I've cut out from, now I didn't have any copper foil sheet. I must have used it all. So I've got bronze foil sheet that I cut 2 lots of those leaves out of. It doesn't match perfectly, but it will work. And I've just got 2 standard white tent fold cards. They're going to be my base. And then all I wanted to add was sentiments and keep them quite simple. So what I've got here is several of the same sentiment that I've die cut. And I've got the same for each card, just keeping it really simple. And what I'm going to do is glue all those multiple layers together to create an image, to create a 3D type effect of the sentiment. Now, if you watch my first video where I was playing with the inks, you'll see that piece of coloured cardstock is where I initially tried the alcohol inks on just standard cardstock to see how they'd work, and they didn't work. But I kept it, and this is one of the reasons I kept it, because I can use it for die cutting. So I cut the thanks out of the green section because there's green in that background, the alcohol background. So here I have 4 of the thanks that I've die cut out, 1 out of the green and 3 out of the white. And what I'm going to do is glue them together and stack them up so it has a bit of depth to the sentiment. And because I wanted it to stand up from the card front and not just be flat. So sentiments like this and fine die cuts are way too fiddly to put like tiny bits of foam on the back and dimensionals and things like that. So a really good trick is to cut multiple of the same thing and glue them all on top of each other. And it makes it quite sturdy, and it also gives it dimension. So this is going to have 3 white thanks and then the green one on top. I could have done more, but I think that's a nice height. Like it does give it a bit of dimension off the card front. And using liquid glue is the best thing because it gives you wiggle room. So if you don't line them up perfectly, you've got a chance to align them and fiddle with them before the glue dries. And I'm using a silicone sheet to glue on because I don't want any glue to spill onto my work surface. And this idea of using multiple die cuts the same and gluing on top of each other is not my original idea. I've seen lots of people do it, but it's a good one to remember. And quite often I won't think of it, and I'll try and cut little strips of foam tape to put on the back of sentiments like this and then get frustrated when they, you can see them from the front. So this is a handy tip to use. So there's my thanks sentiment, and you can see it's quite thick, so it's going to stand up a bit from the card front. Now, if it worries you that you can see the white from the side, you can grab a marker the same colour as the sentiment and colour around the edges so that it doesn't stand out so much that it's white. And this, for the card on the left, I'm just going to keep the sentiment white. So I'm just going to glue and stack 4 of that thanks sentiment in white. And you don't need a lot of glue either. So a little bit of glue, just enough to keep it together. So don't go overboard, and the whole thing doesn't have to be covered in glue. I just tend to put the glue on like the thicker parts of each letter, and that's enough to hold them. They're not going to lift. So there's my white thanks. So now I'm just going to assemble the cards. So first step is trimming the background, and I knew that the edges that are a bit yucky are going to be trimmed off. So I just trimmed that to, I think it was 4 by 5 3/4, each one of these. So I didn't put a layer under them, I just glued them straight onto the white card front. So the one on the right is getting those bronze leaves and the green thanks. And the one on the left, the red one, is getting that gold flourish and the white thanks. So really simply just gluing the panel onto the card front and then gluing the die cuts. And again, with these die cuts, you don't need to glue every single thing. I just glued, maybe 2 leaves per branch, and you just need a tiny little dot of glue. You don't need to cover the whole thing. But if you do want to cover it more, then a good way of gluing things like that is to grab a sponge and dip it into some glue and sponge the back of the die cut. And then that means that, every leaf and twig is and every stem is covered with glue. I've seen a lot of people do that. I don't bother too much like that. Sorry if you can hear my puppy barking in the background. He obviously can hear me talking. I'm going to bring him on camera one day. He'll appear, he'll do a cameo in one of my videos one day. He's a bit of a squirmer, so he won't be in the video for long. Alright, so again, just gluing the sentiments on, nice and simple. I did want, you know, those backgrounds to feature quite a bit, but I needed to cover up a bit of the disaster as well. So here I'm just going through my embellishments and trying to find ones that will match each card. And I have quite a few embellishments. So, you know, it takes a while to go through them all. And some of these packets I've had for a while and never used. So I'm determined to use them all up. So on the one on the left, I think they are the Stampin' Up! Opal rounds that I've decided to use. I didn't want anything stark white. I could have used white enamel dots, but I thought they would be too prominent. And for this one, I'm using the metal butterflies that I think are fairly new out with Stampin' Up! When I left Stampin' Up! They were a new release. So there you go. There's the two cards. And I don't think I did too bad covering up that disgusting green and brown panel. I used enough die cuts on it that it's not too bad. So I hope you picked up some tips and tricks on how to save what you think is a ruined background, and that you have a play with the alcohol inks. And I hope I've inspired you. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, and the notify bell